call this meeting Board of Alderman is in session August 12th, 2019. If you will, welcome everybody and let's pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now, if you will remain standing, and we're just going to have a moment of silence. Okay, thank you. All right, the announcements I have are, please make sure your cell phones are turned off. And if you will, keep reminding everybody, remain quiet during the meeting. Whenever you're speaking there, it bothers your neighbors, bothers the people on the board, and it's just not conducive to us having a good meeting. So while the meeting is going on, please remain quiet. Proclamations, awards, and recognition, we have none. And now we'll have citizen comments.
I didn't sign up.
Okay.
I noticed that you have a resolution tonight to do the Cherry Street one-way resolution. I'm sorry, Lisa Milton, 406 West State Street. I forgot. And I wanted to speak on the Cherry Street one-way resolution. In reading the information, the traffic numbers were taken, and they were taken with regards to an early morning reading and a late afternoon reading and a midday reading. The early morning reading didn't take into account the stores being open on Cherry Street. The late afternoon meeting, it did not reflect, many of the stores are already closed by then. And so that would alter the number somewhat, but I think my biggest concern had to do with the fact that it said in changing the direction, it could end up with some delays created until the Blue Ridge Road interchange is open, and that would alleviate it. And my question is, would you possibly consider waiting until the Blue Ridge Road interchange is in place, because that may alleviate so much traffic in town that there might be other changes that would need to be made. That was the only thing I had to address. Thank you.
All right, Will Chapman. You may want to wait till
I'm sorry, I thought that was the sign-up list for afterwards.
it will be, and it will be. Yep.
Okay.
All right, Buzz Yateman, rezoning be the same thing, and Lisa Milton rezoning will speak again. Okay. All righty. Communications with boards, commissions, and agencies. Ms. Jessica.
Good evening. I'm bringing you our 18-19 update for the planning department and review of some of the planning board's activities. So when we have leadership meetings, we always check in with each other and say, how's it been? And the answer is always busy, and that remains true. Recently, in this last year, we've been working really hard to create an online permitting platform for all of our various permits and applications that we do in our department, and it's been no small undertaking. We are getting close to be able to launch, so stay tuned for that. Been working on the downtown parking and circulation study. We also completed an engineering study for some river restoration work at Veterans Park on Swananoa River, and now that project is shovel ready, which is really exciting for that stretch of river. For that project, we submitted a $100,000 grant to Duke Energy with written support from Monterey College as they are joint property owners to that stretch. We also made a repair to our beloved Flat Creek Greenway that floated away, unfortunately, in some of the high waters we had last year. We completed the Blue Ridge Road Small Area Plan planning process, and you will be seeing a draft document for adoption and presentation next month from our consulting team. And we created a viable project for a large-scale river restoration and floodplain buyout program through the USDA, which is not the typical federal agency you see involved in that work, but they have been blessed with that effort and that money. And so we have jumped through the first 2 hoops. We submitted a package to the state with a proposed idea, and they came and did a site visit, and I put them on foot for 3.5 hours through town, and we were all overheated at the end of it, but we made a good impression, and we're standing by for marching orders for the next step. Like any federal project, it will be slowly percolating. We also completed and closed out some money we had to install some stormwater projects in town. And that was open when I got here, and we were really glad to finally see that start to wrap up. We've also been really working with shoestring amount of time and money to increase our community engagement efforts. As always, in good planning practice, and I always preach a participatory planning perspective, we've had our meetings with the public on the planning projects we've had going on. We've also launched a stormwater webpage recently with education and resources to improve our stormwater conditions in town, help empower everybody to know how they can improve their own property. We are working with RiverLink to hold a rain garden installation and certification workshop in September, and we are excited to have some folks from Public Works join us so they can get certified in that process, and hopefully some of the local landscape professionals in town will join us too. But anybody can come and learn how to do that on their own property. And that'll be in September. In October, we're holding a workshop for people who own property that has water on it, which is many people in town, to understand what a riparian buffer looks like, how it functions, and how you can manage your own property to try to reduce erosion and flood control. And in spring, we are looking to do a residential stormwater solution workshop to talk about mitigating water that comes off of the impervious surfaces of our residential areas. Some of the goals that we have in this new year are rolling out our new online platform, which is going to include the ability to see real-time inspection updates. That's going to be a huge shift in our workload in the department, and it's also going to take some time to work out the kinks. So even once it's live, I know that I hope everybody will bear with us as we get it sorted out. We look forward to having at least 4 community outreach events that are not included in a specific planning process. This would be in addition to. We'll be updating the comprehensive plan in the future land use map. We'll be hiring that part-time building inspector. We've been advertising, and we're trying to expand our reach to get some applications. We look forward to implementing some additional stormwater regulations and programs to continue making progress on that front. And we're going to partner with regional organizations to support housing stabilization and affordability efforts. We've just recently, as in like this morning, updated our local GIS data, which is badly needed and exciting. We've also updated our hardware, but we're also working with Buncombe County to integrate all of our GIS data on the county website so everything is in one place. We have 4 active grants right now, and hopefully this list will grow a little bit over the year. We have the Riverwalk Greenway, Tomahawk Phase 2, the Parking and Circulation Study, and the Swananoa River Engineering. I mentioned we completed the engineering, but we still have money in that fund for permitting and construction oversight once it goes to construction. And then the numbers, which are small and hard to read, and I'm sorry. If you look at some trends in land use, we always look at the rate of minor and major subdivision applications that have been made in our department. And you can see we have a significant number of minor applications as opposed to minor. From this, you'll see this represents more than 135 and counting. We do have 2019 up there just so you can see a trend line that we are already well halfway at this point in the year. The number of parcels that represents since 2011 is 345 parcels total. You can really see that residential building boom in these numbers. Our stormwater permits, last year we had 7. We recently sent out our annual notice of inspection for all stormwater permit follow-ups, and so we'll be ensuring that everybody who has a stormwater permit, that their systems are functioning as they are required to. And that's the revenue associated with those permits. I think you can read that that's a little over $4,000 from last year. Building permits. You can see that we continue to see the single family just far outweighs the number of commercial permits. In 2018 we had 61 single family and we had 0 commercial. That does not include renovation permits. That would be new construction. And these are the fees associated with those. So in 2018 we had $178,520 in building permit fees. The building permit evaluations, this is the value of the properties that were built in town as a result of all of that. And you can see from 2018, $17,490,303 of added value. Our number of building inspections, this is why you can never find Dan. And we'd say he's always out in the field. Dan did over 3,000 inspections last year. And as we continue to ramp up additional stormwater requirements, it's going to be imperative to have that part-time person in place to help manage these inspections, to help balance Dan's workload associated with stormwater. Code enforcement. This is a little bit funny compared to other years. Last year, we heard feedback that citizens wanted us to take a more proactive response to zoning and code enforcement. So we created a spreadsheet with all the roads in town, and you could put a little app so it could randomly pull 2 of those streets out of a hat, essentially. And we did inspections twice a week, which greatly increased our numbers. We also had the part-time inspector from Benchmark who helped us through the spring, which was a big help. But what we noticed was, despite the fact that we did a tremendous number of total inspections, we did not have a significant increase in found violations. So we continued to do complaint-driven, but we also were proactive. And so right now we're evaluating how frequently we want to perform the random inspections. So we're being respectful and cognizant of how much time we actually have in our department to do that, for how much it actually yields. So that's an ongoing conversation. We're a little trial and error to fine-tune that number. And I wanted to give you a little update from the Planning Board report. The graphic you see there is taken from the draft of the Blue Ridge Road Small Area Plan. The Planning Board has been a big help in reviewing that data and participating in that process. The group also had some street closure recommendations for Honeycutt, Carver Avenue, 1st Street, and Campbell Street. There were 8 text amendments, and I'm sure you'll be excited to know there are many more to come. They're all coming down the pipes. They reviewed the Pagettown Road subdivision with 40 lots, and also reviewed the Chapman's Cove subdivision with 10. They recommended the Greenway Master Plan, and they heard the rezoning in June. The Zoning Board of Adjustment, I know you get updates from them, so I'm just going to summarize these. They granted a variance at 58 Old Lafayette, and one from Allen Mountain Drive, and one on 6th Street. There was one variance denied on Oakland, and then they attended UNC School of Government's quasi-judicial training. The Historic Commission summary, they approved their certificate of appropriateness for 127 Cherry Street for the Seven Sisters New Gallery. They also approved the mural for the public restrooms on Cherry Street. They approved a few signs in town, and they also attended the quasi-judicial training at UNC School of Government, and they're also attending another workshop coming up soon in Waynesville. The Greenways Commission has been busy with the generosity of one of their members, Leslie Temple, who updated the Greenway Master Plan. They're working as a group to become more oriented to community engagement and support for Greenways. They had a very successful 5K fundraiser. There was the grant-funded installation of the third piece of public art in Veterans Park, and there you can see the art was recently installed. And they'll be holding a dedication of that art in a sidewalk chalk event in September. So we'll be getting all that information to you soon. And this is just a short list of some of the agencies we work with. I know I'm omitting some unintentionally, but we couldn't do what we do without working with everybody in Asheville and in Buncombe County and at the state and all the way up to DC. The biologist who came to visit for our USDA, flew in from DC just to see us. So we're small, but we are well integrated into all of these groups. Do you have any questions?
Jessica, back on your the first page and the grant, the $100,000 Duke Energy for river restoration with Montreat College. Is that the river as it runs through the college property there? Where are we talking about?
Back behind the ball fields where the college is on the other side.
Right.
So we're your property owner to the center line of the stream, and so we're they.
Right.
And so
Right.
they would need to bless and be supportive of that.
How does that work? Does that require any financial commitment from the town?
It does not require it. We were able to include the money that the town provided to the Pigeon River grant and also include the Pigeon River money as cash dedicated to that project already. The total construction for the project came in at $156,000. We were expecting over 200, so we were really encouraged by those numbers.
And then what about the next one down there, the large scale river restoration through USDA? What does that entail? What are you really talking about?
It is one of the more convoluted federal programs. So USDA typically does river restoration to its natural state for the purposes of mitigating flooding and improving water quality and all of those things. They are also doing contiguous floodplain buyout programs to create easements to do the restoration in. And also in that process, looking at properties that may qualify for the traditional floodplain buyout program to relocate anybody whose entire structure would be impacted by such a program. We're very preliminary stages. It will require a lot of legwork on staff's end to see if we can get a project over the finish line. But the town's requirement on that financially in the end is quite small, and also dependent on how the scale of the project in the end.
Yeah. Well, and then lastly, I was just curious on the Tomahawk Branch Stream Restoration, Phase 2.
Yes.
That's the stretch of the stream as it goes from Hiwassee underneath number 10 over to wherever it goes. But anyway, going in that direction.
It's about 1,400 feet.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah. And is that kind of scheduled for fall?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else? Thank you, Jessica. All right, Josh. Consent agenda.
All right, item A is adoption of minutes. This would be the minutes of July 8th, 2019 agenda session, July 8th, 2019 regular session. Item B is a call for public hearing for text amendments to amend the duplex definition in the land use code. This would be to for the most part, tighten that definition up. It's relatively loose as it's written today. Item C is a call for public hearing for text amendments to amend the time frame for nonconformities. Currently, we have a time frame of essentially a year, 360 days for nonconforming uses. If they're discontinued, they have to come into conformance if they're past a year. The planning board and staff has written a new amendment that would be cut that time frame in half to 180 days versus 360 days. Item D is a call for public hearing for text amendments to amend the historic district and historic conservation district overlay. This is to clean up some confusing language that is written in both those sections and to put some more processes in place for the reviews of those applications that come through. Item E is a budget amendment transferring funds to the golf fund. So this would be to transfer $125,000 from our general fund to our golf fund. For our financial statements, we can't record negative cash, so that's what this is for $125,000. Item F is a budget amendment for the Governor's Crime Commission grant for the police department. This is totally grant funded. This is for laptops and associated equipment for patrol vehicles. So this will be for $25,000 to get those installed and to purchase those. And that'll be your consent agenda.
Motion to approve A, consent items.
I have a question, right?
Yes, sir.
Or just make sure I understand. On the budget amendment to transfer funds, general funds to the golf course, there you are. We're looking for Dean. I want to make sure I have this. I'm saying this correctly, but to remind the public that that would include July 1 through the golf playing months, the heavier golf playing months, generally through October 31 until the time changes and it starts getting dark and cold. And 2/18, those were extremely wet months. I mean, the play was extremely low, and we're not always aiming to be able to break even with the golf course. It's just weather and play dependent. But 2018, as far as the weather, was pretty tough. And July 1 on was, I don't know if there was any wetter than before July 1, but it was wet. Saturdays missed almost every Saturday. It rained in 2018, I think. So.
Yeah, and that budget amendment is for fiscal year 19.
Well, it takes in July 1 through October of. I mean, this spring has been pretty good. We're taking in 6 months of 18, 6 months of 19, right? Yes. The 6 months of 18 were extremely wet. That's the point I'm trying to make. Yeah.
And Dean, if you would, I think you told me this July that we just finished up was one of our best months.
Since I worked here, that was.
Yeah, so there's hope on the horizon.
Yeah. Well, it just helps if it doesn't rain.
Weather permitting.
Yeah, it doesn't rain on Saturday. 18 was incredible.
Oh, yeah, really.
Anything else? All right, a motion to approve the consent items A through F as presented.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Citizen comments now on unfinished and new business.
You got a couple on there.
Yep. We got Mr. Will Chapman.
Is it my time?
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm new.
Todd.
Two, please.
Hi, I'm Will Chapman. I live on 104 4th Street. And due to my lack in public speaking, I'm going to read, if that's okay with you. This is our 4th year living on 4th Street. And it's a very short residential street. I think it's, well, according to the study a couple years ago, 575 feet long. On one end it's Mont Street, and on the other it's a stop sign, and then it turns into Portman Villa. There are no sidewalks or easements on this little road. There are ditches on both sides. In this 575 feet, there's 17 children that live on our road under the age of 18, and half of those are under 10. They like to talk across the street and walk and ride bikes, and they're kind of doing children things. And so we would like the speed limit to be lowered to 10 or 12.5 miles an hour. Despite being a very small road, the residential road, we have a large amount of traffic. You guys did a traffic study a couple years ago, and with the speed limit being 20 miles an hour, just felt like this was too fast for the street, considering how close the houses are to the road and how there are no residential sidewalks or easements. In that study that was done a couple years ago, 865 cars used 4th Street in a 13-hour day. 592 were going west, 273 were going east. The average speed limit was 27 miles an hour, and the top 15% of everyone's speed in that study was thrown out. So even the top 15 was thrown out. The study concluded that it was above generally expected threshold of 5 miles an hour above posted speed limit. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic as well, people walking their dogs and people out and about. And I do think that this residential road and the speed limit was established long before the amount of houses and traffic that there are now. In town, the speed limit is 20 miles an hour, and there are sidewalks. And we don't have sidewalks or even an easement, so it makes sense for our speed limit to be much lower. My main concern is that one of the kids would get hurt one day. In addition to lowering the speed limit, we would ask for traffic calming measures. The street is short, but it's wide and straight, and it's just too easy to speed on. Measures that may naturally slow the street by changing it to one lane or a narrowed street, using chicanes for a curve, or even humps. If we want to leave our house other than by car, we have no choice to walk in the road. And
Thank you, Will.
yeah, thank you.
All right, on the rezoning issue, Buzz Yateman. And I'll remind everyone, give us your name, where you live.
Okay, my real name is Richard Yateman, but everybody knows me as Buzz. I was on the planning board when the last big rezoning issue came up. We did a major rezoning several years back. And one of the issues, of course, was spot zoning, and the other issue was some of the urban zoning issues and whether it should be rural or town. I live on 313 Flat Creek Road. There is a hearing coming up about one parcel of 300 Flat Creek Road, which I'm very much in favor of rezoning that property. I also would tell you that my property is also 0.97 acres, and it would benefit me greatly. So I will be asking for you to rezone my property also down the street. And that being said, it would be my desire to have the entire section of Flat Creek Road taken to that higher zoning level because it makes sense. It just makes sense. Look at the properties. There's properties there that aren't even 1/8 of an acre. It's all mixed up, and restricting us from being able to build additional houses, which I've tried and was turned down by zoning, is costly. So that is my feeling. I don't like spot zoning. I don't think it's the right thing to do. But then again, you're the guys that have to decide that. I would love to see it go through on a wider range, let these people get theirs done, and then let's consider doing it for the whole community because it's the right thing. Thank you, sir.
Miss Lisa Milton.
Lisa Milton, 406 West State Street. I served on the planning board at the June meeting where this application that's coming before you came before us, and the vote ended up a 3-3 tie. I was in the 3 that voted against their application, but it wasn't that we voted against the rezoning of the area. It was looking only at taking one parcel. We felt that the whole area should be looked at and rezoned. It's an area with lots that are large enough to accommodate adding additional structures in. It's a way of essentially reducing the cost of the dirt and making more affordable housing for people. I think if you look at this application, you have a parcel that is surrounded totally by SR2 properties. If you take that one parcel and you zone it TR4, or I believe is what they were asking for, then at that point, it doesn't affect that neighborhood's ability to ask, but what it maybe opens up is the ability for other people who live in other neighborhoods and want their parcel rezoned. It kind of opens the door where it's hard to say, you've allowed one parcel to be rezoned in another district, how do you turn that parcel down? And I think that is definitely a neighborhood that is mixed. It suffers from grandfathered properties that do have multiple pieces on them. So I don't think it's fair to the other neighbors in the neighborhood to not give them a consideration for rezoning the whole piece. So I thank you for listening, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. All right. Seeing no one else signed up for citizen comments, we'll move on to unfinished business. Josh, on number A, I know we've got 2 offers on our former Public Works building. Give us an update.
And maybe Ron and I can tag team this one, but you did get 2 offers on the Public Works building, the former Public Works building, at 2992 US Highway 70. One of those being $350,000, one of those being $400,000. We did get an appraisal done. We had an appraisal performed. Came back at $585,000. I think at this point it seems to be that we would want to wait until we got something closer to $585,000. So at this point, I don't know what the board's wishes are, but that's where we are with it right now. I haven't heard from any of those 2 folks about wanting to increase their offers at this point. So
Ron, if somebody came to us with an offer for what our appraisal reflects the value to be, what do we do at that point?
If you get an offer that's acceptable, I will throw in the caveat about appraisals. A piece of property is worth what somebody will pay for it, and the appraisal gives you some sort of idea. And you may never get 585, and you may get 600 next week. But if you get an offer that's acceptable under the statutes, then you have to advertise that you received that offer. And from 10 days from the time that is published, other people can come in and bid, raise the offer. And the statute sets out how much they have to raise the bid by and the deposit they have to make. If you do get another bid, advertise that and see if there's a higher bid. Once you stop getting higher bids, then you sell to the person who's the highest bidder.
So we have 2 bids at the present time. They're just low. But because we're not really willing to engage those potential purchasers, we just don't do anything. We don't do anything until we're interested in selling it.
Until you got an offer that's acceptable, correct.
And even if it comes in, if we got one tomorrow or by our next meeting for what's reflected in the appraisal, we don't have to engage that one. We can let it go just as well as we did these 2.
You're not attempting to sell the property. You don't have it listed. You're not committed to the sale.
So should we just let it drop, or should we approach those 2 folks and say, listen guys, here's what our appraised value is. Is there any interest on your part?
Well, the statute calls this a negotiated bid, an upset period. So obviously you can go back to them and say, we've got an appraisal that's higher. Do you want to raise your bid? If the town is ultimately interested in getting rid of the building, which I think you are, then you probably want to do that. If you're just entertaining these offers because it's entertaining and it doesn't matter to you whether you get rid of the building or not, that's up to you. But I think the building now truly is a surplus property. And you got folks carrying cash, give them the opportunity.
But we.
No action to take.
There's no action to take outside of just, which they would know by the content of our meeting, that we're open to hearing from folks, so be it. I mean, I don't think we need to ask Josh to go to anybody in particular, any more than if you saw them tomorrow on the street. You could ask them about it. I mean, is that fair to say, Ron?
Yeah, and if you want to actually mark, it's worth asking. You've got a couple of interested parties, and they may say, at least you find out. If they say no, then that might temper the offer, how you look at the next set of offers.
What do y'all think about the potential of advertising that piece on a commercial listing somehow?
Maybe give it till next month,
Okay.
since we just now are saying, publicly what the appraisal is, and
Okay.
see what interest we get, and then consider that next month. I mean, I don't mind considering it now. I don't have any issues about it.
I think one more month would be suitable.
We could sell it, if we could sell it without engaging, if we could sell it without
Absolutely.
having to pay
Right.
a fee, then give it a month anyway.
That's the thing to keep in mind, because if you happen to list it, a commercial properties list, and the realtors get 10%.
Yeah.
So knowing that gives you some way to look at any offer that does start approaching the appraised value.
All right, Josh, number B, Riverwalk Greenway.
All right, I brought this to you last month, and since then we went back and got some pros and cons from the Greenways Commission, as well as the consultant who's working on this project currently for us. I think you've got at least some of this in your packet, hopefully all of it. Maybe missing one piece. I'm not sure if you've got the information from the Greenways Commission, but what they have recommended as their first choice would be to use this piece. If you have this in front of you, not at all. Nobody has any of this. Okay. So to come up from Black Mountain Avenue and use the existing Public Works lot, kind of on the riverside, going back through. We ended up having to move a couple of those buildings. I think the salt bin building in the back, and then taking kind of off road down through and hitting Dealing Avenue, which is the way we've always kind of thought we would go once we got past our building there. That one was the most preferable for the Greenways Commission. That was their first choice. Now, that does have some pros and some cons. Pros are you're close to the river, so it has more of a riverwalk feel. Cons are you run into issues with potential maintenance if you have flooding issues. Anytime you're close to the river, the Greenway, there's always going to be issues of flooding and having to fix those. Now, their second option was to use the Public Works lot as well, but to go on the north side of the building, kind of using Terry Estates and then coming past, I guess, to the edge of our lot pretty much, and then coming back down just as the first option did, I just mentioned to you. That has pros in that there's fewer property owners. It does not run into the risk of having to deal with the river if you have flooding issues, because you're not on the riverbank at that point. So that's definitely seen as a pro, and not having to deal with maintenance on erosion. And then the third option was the option C, which really was not a favorable option, but that was using all of Terry Estates pretty much all the way down and hitting Vance Avenue, where we'd have to do some treatments to Terry Estates, maybe have to do one way or something on that road. So it would be quite a bit of disruption for traffic on Terry Estates. And I did talk to you last month about some of the pricing options on those. The first choice, adjacent to the river on the Public Works lot, was $579,000. Their second choice was also using the Public Works lot north of the building. That was $642,000 for that option. The Terry Estates option is about $760,000.
And so, in the Terry Estates option, that is the one. That's the one at the top of this sheet. Top of this sheet that uses the
That would be,
existing right of way,
that's correct.
et cetera.
that would be using all of Terry Estates all the way down.
So you got first choice and second choice, and the second choice using Terry Estates behind the parking lot and Long River is, what, 50 plus, more than that.
Yeah.
More expensive, but the maintenance is less.
It is, because you're not gonna have to deal with the potential erosion of those banks on the
Right.
Swananoa there.
Well, I have to, even though I can certainly understand the reason for the first choice, going along the river, our experience there at Flat Creek is, it's just expensive, and you're gonna, once you get, you're gonna spend a considerable amount of money, and it can be destroyed in those once every 10 to 15 years floods and so forth. So I'm more inclined to stay away from the river just because of the maintenance and the exposure to not just damage, but total destruction in some places.
And that option adjacent to the river there, it does somewhat hinder some of Public Works operations. You're gonna have to move the fence, so this parking lot will be a little tighter back there than it is currently.
Is that are you referring to your second choice?
I'm referring to the first choice.
Yeah,
on-
first choice, the
Yes.
first choice, right. But as far as, to me, the decision that we have to make is, to me, the big factors are the maintenance along the river and, again, exposure to, catastrophic events. Whereas if you lessen that, even though it's more expensive, it seems like that might be the better long-term decision to make.
If you walk back there, that first choice, it does get tight back there in the back.
Right,
With the parking lot and the bank.
right.
There,
Right.
where that existing ped bridge is that goes across to the hotel. It's pretty tight in there.
Yeah. So, and Josh, did I understand you to say that the second choice was your particular recommendation?
Myself, I like the second choice better for, the reasons that we've been
Right,
talking
reason
about
we stated.
tonight. And I'll say that this is kind of what we're waiting on to give our consultants the go-ahead to start doing the design for the whole project. We're starting to meet now pretty much monthly to have conversations with the consultant. DOT was involved.
Right.
They're going to come every month or every other month. So we're starting to get some momentum on this. So it's good.
So do you need a motion on this? Does anybody, is that good for everybody to stack on it?
Consensus, and this is fine.
Well, I'd make a motion that we approve or authorize planning to, as far as the Greenway expansion, to use the second choice as presented, option using Terry Estates behind the parking lot of the Black Mountain Avenue property and along the river. But that's clear enough.
Got a motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 4-0. Okay, appointment to fill vacancies on town boards. We have Greenways Commission, one unexpired term ending June 30th, 2020. Have one applicant. Do I have a motion to appoint someone?
I'd make a motion to appoint Cindy Costin to that place on the Greenway Commission.
We have a motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Passes 4-0. All right, Josh Cherry Street one-way resolution.
All right, so you have a resolution. Can you put this on the board, please, if you don't mind? You have a resolution for the changing Cherry Street to one-way. I know this is something that you've been talking about for quite some time, and we did do and we're still working on a parking and circulation study, but we did have the consultants look specifically at Cherry Street first so we can get these recommendations to the board. And I'm sorry this is not coming up very good for you to see it, but what this aerial photo shows is kind of the potential layout of Cherry Street, which would be one way. You would have parking stalls on both sides of Cherry Street. The consultants encouraged us to do 4 handicap spots along Cherry Street, so 2 on each side for accessibility. a minimum of one on each side, but they preferred 2 on each side. And then as you get to the top or the north side of Cherry Street, this would be one way from Sutton to State Street. You would have, of course, I think now you're not supposed to do left-hand turns, but I think people do it from time to time. But what this does show is some curb extensions or some bump outs to make that left turn much harder, also to reduce the travel lane for pedestrians crossing Cherry Street. And I know there were a handful of meetings with this steering committee. I know they've seen this. I think we got our recommendations last week from the consulting firm. You would end up losing, doing it this way, I think we end up losing 2 spaces total on Cherry Street.
And it's the other study that we did, and we decided to hold off on making a decision until we got this study. Did it have a recommendation to it, or did we just did it just sort of? I think it just said you can go this way, you can go that way. I don't know that they made a firm recommendation, but that's the reason I was asking. I tended to think that they actually made the same recommendation
I think
without the parking being parallel on both sides the way this one proposes it, which I like that. That makes sense, I think. But I think it was the same direction with the right turn up at the state.
Yep.
The parking was different, that's all. So my point is, two studies, and they both pointed in the same direction. So if the board approved this, what's the time frame? I understand Lisa's comment about, and I think it's a valid point about the traffic. The folks doing the study, and Jessica, you have to help me if I'm wrong, but they to the best they can, they tried to assess that impact. It's pretty difficult to do, but it's sort of like what are you going to do with that? You really can't. You're not going to be able to go the other direction because it just can't. It's just that would never work. With the road configured the way it is. So you're really going north is the only way. I think the only viable option, and I understand your point, but I think it would be. I don't have any issues with going ahead and doing it. So.
What's the time frame on this?
I will say, I know I've had Jamie reach out to the folks who have done our street striping to get an estimate from them on when they can come stripe it. I think we can get this. My goal would be to have this done before fall. So the next
get those
few weeks.
extended things out
Those
there.
extended things may be a little harder to do by fall, but
well, that's a pretty important part of it,
yes,
though.
it
Really.
is.
And you'll have your signs.
You have signage. That's correct. The street striping is the easy part, right?
Yeah,
Striping
well, I
the
would
parking
think so, yeah.
spaces.
I've been amazed how well things have gone without anything, frankly. But anyway, I would, and also with those the handicap spaces, does that just require painting or signs also?
Or I have to do signs as well.
Now,
So
the truck deliveries, this will make it.
Truck deliveries, we don't have specific loading zones. Jessica, you want to speak to truck deliveries? Do you mind?
Yeah, in this configuration.
come back, Jessica.
I will answer your questions, and if I can't, our consultants are here, so they can. But in this configuration, we retain enough width so that if a delivery truck needs to double park, there is enough width in the travel lane for cars to go around it safely. Whereas now, with 2 lanes of traffic, that doesn't quite work, as I think we've all experienced at some point or another. And I will say, DOT mentioned that we'll need an encroachment agreement for the bump outs, and so that will add a little bit of paperwork to the process.
Thank you. Any discussion besides the audience?
I would recommend that we at least look at 6 handicap spaces instead of the 4.
I think the minimum was 2, they're requesting us to have 4.
I think 6 would be a good number.
Can we feed that into the traffic study that's still going on? I mean, I think there might be implications to that, maybe wanting to think through just what's needed and so forth. I mean, their recommendation was 4. I think. Isn't that right?
It's true, and we can always add more later if we need to. I think it's easier to see how it functions and add the capacity necessary than to build it and then take it away.
Who makes the decision as to where they're going to be at?
The recommendations came from the consultants, but mid-block is generally advantageous because it's equally distributed between the different stores, and it keeps folks from having to walk all the way uphill. I think it's 2 parts.
Is that agreeable to you? Because we could just, if we could need them, we can add them later.
That's fine.
All right,
Motion.
I'd make a motion for approval of resolution R 1916, changing Cherry Street to a one-way travel.
Have a motion on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 4-0. All right, new business. Josh?
All right, so item 8A is a utility pair reimbursement agreement with NCDOT. They were doing some work on Blue Ridge Road some time ago. Did hit one of our water lines, which hasn't affected anybody, but we did want to get it fixed. We did go ahead and make that repair. The total was $28,900. DOT has agreed to reimburse us for that full amount, and the agreement is in your packet for us to sign to get back to them so we can take care of that.
Motion to approve is presented.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. All right, Josh,
This is item 8B is a resolution prescribing procedures for disposal of surplus personal property. This the majority of this information comes directly out of the general statutes. This is stuff we currently do now. However, we're unable to get we wanted to get an updated copy of this on file. So what you have before you is the resolution that just allows staff to do to do gov deals or to sell surplus property as long as it's below the $30,000 value. Personal property, right? Not real estate, but personal property.
any questions, guys? Need a motion to approve as presented.
So moved.
Have a motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Art and afternoon lease.
So item 8C is the art in the afternoon lease. We did this a couple of months ago, and the board wanted to come back and revisit this for the start of the new school year here, I guess next week. So what you have before you is essentially the same lease that we had just signed with her a couple of months ago. That rent will be $1,000 a month that she will pay for that space at the Carver Center. I think it's about 2,500 square feet of space. That is for an after-school program, 5 days a week.
I was reading in the lease that after 1 year, then it goes into month-by-month basis.
Unless you do a new lease, correct. There's a whole new lease.
So if we want to go up on the price, it 12 months or 24 months, we have to start a new lease.
Correct.
Motion to approve the lease agreement as presented.
Have a motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. All right, 4th Street speed limit reduction.
So after at our last meeting, I did give you some options on 4th Street. I did meet with Will's wife, Michelle, a few weeks ago and just went over some of those options. I think by the end of the meeting, she was asking, well, can we at least for the time being try to lower the speed limit and see what that does for us? So what you have in your packet is I guess it's a resolution or an ordinance to reduce the speed limit from 20 to 15 miles an hour. and then we'll put up the associated signage on 4th Street needed to reduce that speed limit from 20 to 15.
Any discussion?
The only thing I would say is if, after if we do indeed approve the lowering the speed limit to 15 miles per hour, if we don't see any change, let's consider what else we might be able to do. So, with that, I would make a motion to accept Josh's recommendation of lowering the speed limit to 15 miles per hour.
Have a motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 4-0. Firehouse Station Number 1 Foundation, Josh.
All right, so this, what you've got in your packet is some information that was done a few years ago. And I think, as I noticed when we were going through budget this year, we've been putting some money aside in a capital reserve for the fire department to do some renovations on the interior of the fire department. I think most notably kind of the north side, the back side of the building where the restrooms and living quarters are currently. We currently have a $275,000 in the capital reserve for those interior renovations. Speaking with our new chief, Scotty, it just made sense to come to the board and at least make you aware that we wanted to take a look at this study that was done a few years ago before we move forward with doing any interior renovations. It just made sense that we want to take a look at the structural integrity of the building to make sure everything was okay before we move forward with doing interior renovations, so it wouldn't be something that we would come back later and say, well, I wish we would have done this first. So what you have, like I said, is a number of years old. It may be worth us having someone else take a look at this, just due to the fact that it is 7 years old, and some of these numbers could be, more than likely, they're probably more expensive now, just to be honest, than they were in 2012. So at this point, I think we just wanted to bring this to your attention, maybe get some direction from the board on how you would like to proceed.
What kind of cost are you thinking about?
This study cost us about $10,000. I don't know what a new one would cost. I would hope maybe 15, less than 20, hopefully.
I think it'd be less. Is there any reason why you wouldn't? And maybe at this juncture, since it's 7 years old plus, it doesn't make any difference. But if MedBlock has a file on it, would it make any difference? The cost of it?
It could end up being some savings. That's true. Be happy to look at that with MedLock too.
Seems like you might want to ask them.
Sure.
About it.
Well, I'm certainly not a contractor, but it seems like what they're talking about is like these commercials you see on television all the time about the ramjack. They go down to the granite and stabilize it there, and then support and jack the foundation up using those pilings or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff is kind of foreign to me. It's the language that's spoken in here, but yeah, it's definitely getting in there and kind of going in and seeing the condition underground. I know there's everyone's always said there's a creek that runs underneath the building, kind of like the post office, but definitely, I think it's worth examining that with some of these recommendations that they've got in here, seeing what's going on underneath.
But what you're asking the board is, and I don't know that it requires any action, but you're just asking for our feedback on not moving forward with any other renovations that were planned, scheduled. Were they scheduled in this fiscal year?
I think they were scheduled in last fiscal year.
Last.
And we didn't.
Okay, so it's scheduled, but before we do, you're just asking for our direction to hold off on any of those renovations until we get this structural engineering report, either revised or a new one, and understand what kind of structural issues we have to deal with.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if that requires a motion or not, but it certainly sounds like a wise thing to do to me.
So, if we ended up needing to spend some, we do have that reserve money now, so if we ended up needing to spend some money to do another report, we've got that.
If you go back to them, they've already got their base, and may not need an awful lot, right?
We'll definitely go, we'll talk to them before we move forward on anybody else.
Okay. All right, Little Free Library Agreement.
I guess that's mine. The town was approached to put what I'm calling a little free library, because that seems to be the common term used nationwide. But you're talking about these freestanding boxes. They're just containers that people put books in. You could take a book out for free. Usually the condition is you leave one in its place, and it's just not maintained by the taxpayer and not supplied by the taxpayer. A common practice is to have an individual or group that's always responsible for each unit. And that's the person who gets the phone call if it gets to be in disrepair, being misused. I've drafted an agreement, proposed agreement, that basically allows the placement of a little free library at the south end of the Flat Creek Greenway, basically in the Charlotte Street right-of-way. So both those areas controlled by the town. You'll be the ones that have to say, can it go there or not? But I put in there, and there were concerns, and I haven't spoken to everybody about it, but there's concern about what it's going to be used for. Is it going to be saved? Is it going to be kept up? And I hope in the draft that's in your packet now, we've addressed that it will be maintained, a contact person to reach out to if it's not being taken care of, the right of the town to have it removed or remove it if it becomes an issue. There are concerns it might be used for reasons other than for use by books. If we find it's being used for an illegal purpose, an improper purpose, the agreement you have allows the town to say, just take it out. But this percolated along, hadn't made it to the board. I wanted before Josh Son sets the thing and allows it to happen. We wanted to know if the board was interested in doing this at all, and if so, if the terms of the agreement as drafted is sufficient, or the board feels it's satisfactory to protect the town's interests.
As long, you say there in 6 that the town may require the removal of, if it becomes a nuisance. And that's so broad.
That's pretty broad.
Pretty much.
Usually you don't like that, but this time it was intentional.
Something unimaginable comes up. We've got a little leeway there, don't we?
Any other discussion? Motion to approve as presented.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Passes 4-0. Okay, now we're gonna have a public hearing on the rezoning 300 Flat Creek Road. I'd like to have a motion to open the hearing.
So, go ahead.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, normally I try to hit the highlights, but this one's a little bit more detail, so bear with me. The subject parcel is a little over 8/10 of an acre and is currently contains a single-family dwelling and is zoned SR2. The owners are requesting that the property be rezoned to TR4. In close proximity to the parcel, there are other zoning districts including TR4 and UR8. The character of the neighborhood is primarily single-family residential with low and moderate densities. The request for the TR4 zoning will allow for a similar type and scale of development that is entirely characteristic of the area. The most significant difference between the existing and the proposed districts is lot size, which is reduced from 1/2 of an acre to 1/4 of an acre. At this density, the parcel could be subdivided to create one additional parcel. The area is served with all utilities and road accesses necessary, and the parcel is not encumbered by utility easements, steep slope, floodplain, floodway, or stream buffer requirements. The difference in uses are as follows. In TR4, place of worship is a permitted use, but is a conditional use in SR2. In SR2, a bed and breakfast home is allowed as a conditional use, but not in TR4. In SR2, a boarding house is allowed by a conditional use, but not allowed in TR4. And in TR4, a manufactured home park is allowed under special uses, but not in SR2. The planning board heard this case at the June meeting where, as you heard, there was a 3-3 tie vote. At the meeting, 2 other Flat Creek property owners also attended and voiced their support of the application, but also expressed interest in having their own properties also rezoned to TR4. During the noticing process, we have received no phone calls or complaints against the application. If rezoned and potentially subdivided, the parcel would create one new lot, as I mentioned, which does support the residential character of the area. Of the closest SR2 properties to the north and south of the subject parcel, only 7 of them are conforming lots. There are about 14 other ones that are legally non-conforming, meeting only the requirements for UR8 or TR4, which is basically to say the surrounding area is more dense than its assigned existing district at SR2. And if rezoned and or subdivided, it would actually be more characteristic of the existing area than it is now. There's certainly been a conversation around spot zoning, and so I wanted to give you some information about that to consider. The definition of spot zoning is defined in North Carolina case law as a zoning ordinance or amendment which singles out and reclassifies a relatively small tract owned by a single person and surrounded by a much larger area that is uniformly zoned, so as to impose upon the smaller tract greater restrictions than those imposed on the greater area, or so to relieve the small tract from restrictions to which the rest of the area is subject, and it can be referred to as spot zoning. However, in North Carolina case law, also provided by the School of Government in Childress v. Yadkin, it is not a spot zone where the difference in zoning districts is modest. In that particular case, the court upheld that a restricted residential zone and rural agricultural districts were sufficiently similar to not be designated as spot zoning. Spot zoning is not illegal in North Carolina. However, it is subject to a greater level of scrutiny, meaning the validity of the request is not assumed as it would be in a traditional rezoning application. In 2005, the requirements for spot zoning were formalized by adding a requirement for a statement of why the request is found to be reasonable. A spot zone request is also required to be compatible with the town's comprehensive plan. This is one of the rare instances in which a comprehensive plan is policy-making versus a guidance document. The concept of validity to the request can be made considering a variety of questions. And some of the standards that are issued by the School of Government include: does the property have different physical characteristics that make it especially suitable for the proposed rezoning, such as peculiar topography or unique access to roads or utilities? The only unique aspect of this lot is that it is particularly large in the given context of the area. Are there land uses on or in proximity to the site that are different from the uses that make most of the surrounding property? And the comment is no, that the use on the property that is proposed is harmonious with those and consistent with what is already there. What would the proposed range of newly permissible development be in harmony with legitimate expectations of neighbors? And I would say yes, that the amount of permitted uses are nearly identical. And we've established there are many other small lots neighboring. And then the state also says, have appropriate safeguards been incorporated in to protect the interest of those affected? Considering the majority of the SR2 lots are already legally non-conforming, being smaller than necessary, and the uses are very similar, there are no additional safeguards necessary to consider this application. The applicant has volunteered that they seek to rezone their property in order to create one additional single-family dwelling. That's a lot of language on that topic, but I felt it would be good for you to hear that before you consider this application. Do you have any questions?
Would that additional dwelling be located at 300 Flat Creek Road?
It would have another address, but that parcel would conceivably be subdivided to create one additional lot.
I think, the whole thing with spot zoning, it's relative to everything. But, this article from David Owens at the School of Government, Attorney Owens, that was distributed and is available to the public if they want it, from Josh, or maybe it's in the agenda. The agenda packet, I don't know. But nonetheless, it does seem like spot zoning to me.
It can be
And,
spot zoning,
and
yeah.
I think it can be, it could certainly be contested. And that the fact that, I think, I gather all the neighbors are open to zoning the neighborhood. I do think that's the better way to go. So I'm not in favor of doing this tonight. I'm in favor of being a little bit broader in our planning and just doing the neighborhood, and that not only takes all the guesswork out of it, and we're not not in risk of doing spot zoning, but furthermore, it sets a better precedent for the next time it comes up, which it certainly will. So that'd be my thinking.
If I may butt in just a moment, what this board has to find, and I know you'd rather take the policy approach and let's just take the neighborhood, but you've got a petition before you, and the things you have to look at is, one, is it spot zoning or not? And that could go either way. It's not necessarily spot zoning just because it's an isolated piece. It has to be an isolated piece that is either added restrictions to it or restrictions removed compared to its neighbors. And if it is spot zoning, it's not necessarily illegal. Then this board has to determine, okay, if you reach the conclusion it's spot zoning, as you apparently have. The second question is this rezoning reasonable? And there is a little bit stronger burden that the applicant has to meet or you have to find. If I have a lot that's on the edge of TR4 and I ask to be rezoned, I'm just asked to be incorporated, that's almost a given. You know, it doesn't make sense, fine, you're done here. If you've determined it's spot zoning, again, that's one decision to make. The second is, if it is spot zoning, you look at it and see, in the facts that are provided to you, is it really reasonable that this piece of property be treated like its neighbors and be allowed to be subdivided so that it's like the lots around it, which are less than half-acre lots. I think you've got to address those and not just say we're not going to consider your petition because we want to take the bigger approach. And I know it'd be nice to be able to just say, will you wait? But I think the applicants are entitled to that analysis and a yes or no on their request.
Okay, Kate, well then lead us through that then. What's the reasonableness factor that you want to consider?
I can't think of a good example, a better example probably, but if I had a residential lot in the middle of agricultural property and I wanted just a small lot and I wanted it rezoned so I could build houses on it, which aren't allowed. Is that reasonable that suddenly I get to start residential structures in the middle of a farm? That's stretching. However, if this farm is already developed into residential, it's become more farmers' houses than garden, it's probably a little bit more reasonable that I'd be allowed to fit. I think in this situation, if there's anything there that helps you, is to look, if you rezone this so that this lot can be turned into 2 lots, and are these 2 lots going to be getting some great benefit that the lots around it doesn't have, then is that reasonable? Is that a high degree of reasonableness that they'd be allowed to treat it like they're close neighbors? If this lot were sitting in the middle of some 5-acre tracts and I wanted to cut my half-acre lot into 2 quarter-acre lots, that may be less reasonable. Again, I'm just tossing examples. I can't make a finding for you.
Right. Well, this article from Owens, he also uses, is some court case he's referring to, but that it's also a factor of whether it's part of a comprehensive plan at all. That does it fit? Does it fit with any comprehensive plan at all for that particular area in your town and so forth?
And you've got to make that decision because you've got to have a state consistency first.
Right.
And Jessica may be able to address that to some degree.
Right. It just seems to me that there's not just the reasonableness factor, which I get what you're saying, but there's, the whole thing's relatively subjective, basically. And then you can still take the risk and spot zone and just know that you've got a risk of being sued and it doesn't work, which I don't think we're interested in that. But, it's still just the best decision the board can make as to whether it's a prudent, the direction's prudent on it. And it's not that we're dismissing the applicant's, his or her desire for the property to be rezoned. It's that we're taking in all the factors and saying we'd rather do the whole area.
True, but I think your findings have to be that at this point, either it's spot zoning and the request at this point without a rezoning is not reasonable, and find the facts that support that.
Well, I thought that's where I started, that I thought it was spot zoning.
But, yeah, you said you concluded spot zoning, and are we making a reasonableness, giving it the reasonableness test? I think if you could put that to words, then you're good to go. I'm not trying to talk you out of it.
Right.
I'd just like to see that analysis in there, because if there's a lawsuit to sue you because you should have rezoned, I get to defend that.
Right.
If there's a lawsuit to sue you because you did rezone, I get to defend that. I just want the information in the record.
Well, let me ask this. I was thinking that I read that you have to include a reasonableness statement.
Yes.
Do we have a reasonableness statement?
That takes you back to your statement of consistency, which has two parts. That's correct.
There is an additional requirement to say why it is reasonable, and that
Right.
would come out of your deliberations. It's not something I draft, but I can address the comprehensive plan briefly. That in the town's comprehensive plan, there is language about supporting the character of existing neighborhoods with infill development that utilizes existing infrastructure in order to maximize public investment and revitalize and support existing neighborhoods. And I think the concept, if I may, of reasonableness is largely noted on the validity. I think that those questions that are from that same article from Mr. Owens about any peculiarities are the surrounding uses, is the area of newly permissible development in harmony in legitimate expectations of neighbors. And Ron, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought those concepts spoke to the reasonableness of an application.
Well, those are the factors to consider.
Jess, according to this map right here, there is not everything that touches and borders this piece of property is zoned the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it's next door to TR4.
Yes, it is one parcel between it and TR4. That's right.
So everything around it is the SR2.
That's right.
And from what I read that Larry was talking about, the smaller the lot that you try to rezone, the more you're getting yourself in trouble as far as being spot zoning.
No, well, that's not to get yourself in trouble.
It meets the definition.
It meets the definition. I think it's it can be spot zoning. I think it's fine to call it spot zoning. Just don't confuse labeling it spot zoning with being illegal or prohibited. It just requires an additional standard.
If we were to take into consideration this request and it were to be approved, would other people, so like Buzz, who spoke earlier, would he be able to come before the planning board and this board and request the same?
Anybody can
He
make
can
any
do that.
application of this board.
You can do that anyway.
It would not preclude you from continuing on and looking at the area, which I think is a wise thing to do. We've already to look at the corridor.
Right.
A lot of people, when you start talking about zoning, they start talking about money. By changing this, would there be any type of a monetary increase, monetary decrease, zoning, or how does that work?
There would be some potential for some new lots to be created if someone so choose to do that, in which case they could sell it or build a house on it.
Right now, the way it stands now, they cannot build an additional house on a piece of property.
But remember, a lot of these lots are already too small. So a lot of them could not be subdivided. Some of them could and create a couple of lots, but many of them are already at the TR4 size, and about a third of them in the potential study area would be too small to be subdivided. Even if TR4, they would remain legally non-conforming and be closer to a UR8 because they are so small. It is quite a grab bag over there of lot sizes, for sure.
Well, so how long would it take to do to do a broader review and rezoning of the neighborhood?
I would say 6 months would probably be a fair estimate, considering the amount of noticing in public meetings we would want to have a really informed process. I mean, conceivably, it could be shorter, but if there were any hiccups or any requests from the community to examine something else, it would elongate that because our groups meet only once a month.
I mean, your typical time frame just with advertising is usually a minimum of 2 months.
Yeah.
Just with the call fors and the actual public hearing.
What were the pros and cons of the planning board?
I think Lisa spoke eloquently to that and effectively. There were concerns about spot zoning, but there's a greater request to look at the area. But as Ron said, the request to look at the greater area is appreciated and a valid thing to do, but it cannot stop you from examining an individual's right to petition for such a rezoning.
Well, let me ask what everybody on the board thinks. It's a little bit easier for me to state it. In the negative. Is there anything unreasonable about in the request to zone this piece of property? I mean, we've already heard from the planning board and from people in the neighborhood that they're open to the neighborhood being rezoned accordingly. And so if we want to move in that direction, is there anything, I mean, that's a whole different issue, frankly. But it seems to me that it makes the reasonableness of this decision even more so, frankly. Does that make sense?
I'm not trying to push you over the edge, but it's a slightly higher standard. And so when you're sitting there, what's unreasonable about it and what's reasonable about it, the reasonable part has to carry a bigger weight in the normal situation of rezoning.
Well, I kind of struggle with that, frankly. That I can articulate the reasonableness of it, other than it's not a very high standard that I have that I can articulate. Can anybody else?
We knew this would be really easy for you.
I think that
But if you can't articulate the reasonableness of it, then that's a challenge. I mean, that's challenging.
And what's unreasonable about it is, I don't know. What's reasonable about it is that it's going to allow them to create lots that look like they're adjoining lots.
Not because they're zoned like the adjoining lots, because of the size of the adjoining
allows them
lots.
to be of the same size.
Yeah.
The unreasonable part is if I have to dream up one and see if you buy it, is I can't think of a truly unreasonable, why it's truly unreasonable, other than you are zoned this way, your neighbors are zoned this way. It is a few feet to the next zoning district. It would take a lot of lots being rezoned to make you adjacent. Is it unreasonable to pull this piece out and for no greater benefit than this individual being able to create a new lot? But that's what it's always about. Is the reasonableness of it outweigh that?
Does that help? Yeah, it does. I tell you what I'm wrestling with, and I think it's worth articulating, and that is I want us, and I think we're doing so, but to have a discussion and a decision that would be suitable for the next time it comes up. That we say, we have these criteria and we can apply them, and that's kind of really what I'm shooting for is to be able to connect those dots.
What you'll find in a lot of communities, they gave up and they have conditional zoning, whereas lot by lot you can make a deal with your local government to rezone with different or fewer allowances for what you can do with it. For example, in SR2 you can have boarding houses, or you can have And so people want to be SR2, and you don't, you want to put some limits on it, say, okay, you can be SR2 instead of TR4, but with conditional zoning, you can put further limitations on it. In this situation you have in front of you can't. If you rezone them TR4, they're just rezoned TR4. And that's what a lot of communities have done when they got so many of these that were, on the one hand, they were spot zoning, but the second, there was lots of reasons to go ahead and grant the zoning, and they just gave up on that argument with conditional zoning, put it in their ordinances, and addressed it a lot at a time.
Well, are there neighbors who are being harmed by this? They're not.
I thought you said there were some, how many were contacted around? Somewhere I heard that.
It's in the memo we gave, but everybody within the noticing area, which made up 3 different zoning districts, and none of them came out against it. We had no issues with it.
Right. So no neighbors have expressed any aspect about being adversely affected. The neighbors are just speaking they'd rather do it, which is a different discussion.
Right. You would typically see that more when you downzone, but this would be a moderate up zone.
Right.
Well, that was going to be my question too, because if you look at it, it says public hearing tonight at 6 o'clock. And this was posted in the town bulletin board on 7/9. It was posted in the Black Knight News 7/18, 7/25. With the exception of Buzz, is there anybody else here tonight that lives in this area on Flat Creek Road?
That's also the property is also listed.
1 person. 2 people. So 3 people here, representative of the residents of that area of Flat Creek Road. So, to me, if you were that gravely concerned about it or had issues with it, you would show up at the meetings and voice your concern. What's our recommendation?
Well, I'm inclined to.
This is a public hearing. You can still take public.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Before you reach conclusion.
Yeah, we can.
Thank you.
There is somebody. Oh.
Elaine Lotzenheiser, 410 Ravina Road. I was at that planning board meeting, and the understanding was that the next meeting, she would bring maps and material to consider doing a larger portion of Flat Creek Road. And that wasn't done. And that was the understanding of the planning board when they voted 3 and 3, and not in other words, the split was that there were enough people that spoke that night that they would like to see a larger area looked at for rezoning to TR4. And if you rezone a larger portion, the people that don't want to have a density, they don't have to. The people that want to, if their lot conforms to that, they could. So the object is not to do this tonight, but to do a larger portion at a little bit later time. And if she'd followed through on that from June, we'd be having a hearing in the next month or 2 that would be considering a larger portion of the rezoning.
Please come up.
Again. A lot of discussion about Richard Gateman, 313 Flat Creek Road. A lot of discussion about the reasonableness and unreasonableness of the proposal. I would find it very unreasonable to turn this request down. People have taken a terrible piece of property. You all have probably seen that house. Awful disrepair. They're turning it into a really nice house. And they want to set up that as a pretty much of a low income or moderate income house and build another one probably just like it next to it, which would vastly improve that neighborhood. So I would ask that the board go ahead and approve this tonight for these people to go ahead. They've got a lot of money invested in this, and penalizing them, making them wait for rezoning of the whole neighborhood, I think would be detrimental to their project and to the town as a whole. They could abandon it and just leave it like it is if they wanted to. I do think that the rezoning of that entire road is appropriate, and you should look at that at its earliest nature. But we can't stop these people from making a nice development now.
Buzz,
Yes, sir.
Did you tell us that you were on the planning board when this was zoned?
I was, sir.
SR2?
Yes, sir. I was, at the time, the planning board was looking at trying to preserve open space. There was not the residential pressure. This is what, 6, 7 years ago, I guess. I get old, your mind slips. But yeah, the whole idea was to try and keep things open and rural. And now, like Mountain has progressed, we're becoming very urban. And we have to embrace that because there are more people wanting to live here. There's a need. You talk about dollars. You take the one lot, turn it into two, your tax revenue for the town goes up. You know, it's just that simple. You put another family in, businesses in town benefit. It's all a plus for the town. So I really think that you should go ahead and approve this tonight and move forward with appropriate rezoning, whatever you have to do, in an expeditious manner. Thank you.
Anyone else? State your name and address, please.
My name is Thomas Wright. I live at 351 Avena Road. I am the general contractor / partner in the house 300 Flat Creek. The only thing that separates us between the TR4 and the SR2 is an 1/8 acre piece of lot on Padgetttown Road. We're the very next person on Flat Creek Road. We're the only property right that's next to the actual zoning. So it's not like we're out in the middle of nowhere. We're actually right next door, besides one 1/8 acre lot that cannot be rezoned anyway. So I was just asking if you would please consider the fact that we're planning on building the house right next to where it was at. The old used to be a barn there. Used to be some kind of establishment there. We want to build it right on the same property that was there on the Roseland Garden property. So that'd be bigger than even the 1/8 acre. That'd be 1/4 acre and more. So we're not like we're downsizing anything. We're just going to an extra lot. Thank you.
We have anyone else wants to make a comment? All right. Any more discussion on the board? Yep. Motion to close the public hearing? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Motion to adopt the statement of consistency as presented.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Now, a motion to rezone or not rezone 300 Flat Creek Road from SR2 to TR4.
I would make a motion to approve the rezoning. It's spot zoning, but I think in the discussion with town attorney, it meets the reasonableness standard. And I would like to ask Josh if you would just get things underway to move forward with rezoning the rest of the adjoining properties there.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 4-0. All right, communication from staff. Mr. Ron Sneed, Town Attorney.
I have just a quick one, an oddity in the law. We had a recent court decision, and where this plays in is we're always doing this. Staff is making decisions, and the staff can make a decision that the property owner doesn't like, and the property owner has a right to appeal. They have 30 days to appeal to the Board of Adjustment. Another thing is staff can make a mistake, and staff can come back and correct that mistake, subject to some limitations. And that's set law. What is new, I don't know if it's new, but at least the courts have now opened their mouths and said it out loud, is if staff makes a decision that you as the representatives of the town think is an incorrect decision, you think they made a mistake, this board can actually appeal to the Board of Adjustment. There was a case that came up before the Court of Appeals, I can't remember what the facts were now, where a decision was made by the staff. A month later, somebody discovered, and the administration discovered, we don't like that decision. We think it was an error. Now, the staff doesn't think they were an error. The board did. And so they tried to set that action aside, go to the homeowner and say, staff made a mistake. And the homeowner challenged that, and the court said if the Board of Aldermen wanted to challenge that decision by the staff, they needed to appeal to the Board of Adjustment within 30 days. Don't know exactly what that means to you. You can't put an oversight process in, but it might be worth note to pay a little more closer attention to your board minutes in case you think there's been a decision. It's the only way I know to monitor it is get your planning board minutes, your Board of Adjustment minutes, your staff reports, and look at what they've done. So if a decision is made, you have that opportunity as a board to say, I think they made a mistake, but the town wants to take this to the Board of Adjustment. Probably going to happen once in a lifetime, but the courts have said that's how you got to do it. If the town as a body determines that the staff has made a decision that you feel was an improper interpretation.
Josh, on the whole, how long would it take if you, as part of your report at the end of a board meeting, gave a briefest summary of actions taken by the planning board in the prior month?
And I think you need to limit that to just written action.
Written action.
Yeah, not phone call
Written
and
action.
ideas to do that, but a written decision.
That might be a good way to do that, and it would actually be helpful to the public too, I think. Would that take more than?
Depending on the size of the agenda, it should take more than 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I would think.
Well, something to think about.
Well, Board of Adjustment gets appealed to Superior Court, but it's staff-type decisions. Your decisions, Jessica's decisions, Dan's decisions, except Dan's decisions go to the insurance commission.
Anything else, Ron?
That's it. Just want to make life more complicated.
Be a blessing or a curse. All right, Josh.
Couple things. We'll have a volunteer luncheon. I think we had last year, maybe in May. We've just missed it, to be honest with you. So now we're going to have it in September on the 19th at noon at Lakeview is our plan. I hope everybody is okay with that.
It'll be Thursday.
That'll be a Thursday. And just to give everyone a heads up that's watching or listening, or will be watching or listening, we're starting our preparations, and maybe should have already, but we've got a group together for our upcoming 2020 census. So we're starting to get some information about that out. We put some stuff on our website. The county's done the same thing. So we're hoping to get folks, make folks aware of that, and get folks prepared to report to the census if you in fact get a questionnaire, because it means a lot on funding for towns and counties. Those of you that travel I-26, that construction will be starting in September, and it'll last for 5 years, they say. So be prepared for that. It's supposed to be much better once they get done. I think it'll be 4 lanes on each side heading from Asheville to Hendersonville. So, and then to get back to you on our test of Lake Tomahawk, it took a while to get back. Finally, to get those back for those water tests. I'll say that in order to be over the limit, you have to have 235 fecal coliform colonies in 100 milliliters of water to be over the safe limit. Ours came back August the 2nd at 11 colonies, so it is safe to be in. You're not supposed to be in it, but it is safe. And then our Citizens Academy starts tomorrow. It'll be the first meeting. And that's all I've got.
Any communication from the board?
Couple of things, Mr. Mayor. I saw Sharon here earlier. There she is, our new chamber president, and I want to commend she and her staff on the Sourwood Festival this past weekend. I was out there from 9 to 12 on Saturday, and we had a really good crowd come through, dodging raindrops. I'm not sure how it did for the rest of the day after I left, but looked like everybody was very happy with what was going on. Saw a lot of people eating, a lot of people buying stuff. And second thing is I was very pleased to hear this gentleman speak about Roseland Gardens, where the development's being put, well, the 2 homes are being put in. From the African American standpoint in Black Mountain, Roseland Gardens has a major historical perspective in that little 4-way stop there. And to see something going in that's going to be nice, it's, it's well appreciated. And I think it's long overdue that that area has been, that home and that piece of property has been developed. So thank you for what you're doing.
Anyone else? Just want to mention to the folks, residents who live here in town, we have a garbage system and people that pick up our garbage. And you have some outside folks that don't live in town, that don't pay for those garbage pickups and the brush pickups, that are abusing our town taxpayers. Happens all the time. And I just, if you see that or have a sense of something like that maybe going on, get in touch with the town manager, because that's number one, it's against our ordinances. Number two, it's cheating. And number three, it just adds to the cost of when we have to regroup and do our garbage contracts in the future. It's based on what the tonnage and volume is that's coming out of this town. And some of it, I'm not going to make a percentage, but some of it I know is not ours. That's it. With that, meeting adjourned.